Until now, we've been learning Siman Kuf Chaf. And as I've mentioned a few times, not everybody knows, but there's a little Siman called Siman Reish Beis. Okay, it's at the end of, in the traditional Shulchan Aruch, so it's at the end of Chelik Beis and Shulchan Aruch. And what most people don't even notice about it is because the end of Chelik Beis is Hilchos Nikah, and then there's this really, really long Siman Reish Aleph Hilchos Mikvos. Okay, so most people don't even realize that between Hilchos Mikvos and the back of the book, all the other things that are in the back here, there's this little thing. It's on less than one page even, Siman Reish Beis, which is called Bimei Dvarim HaChotzim B'Tevillas Keilim. Okay, things that are Chatzizos for Tevillas Keilim. Okay, which I guess sort of connects to Hilchos Mikvos. So it's this little siman. I wouldn't know about it, but I just sort of banged into it. And the Mechaber in Kuf Chaf told you to look over here. But yeah, so we're going to learn this siman. It's going to take us a few times. There's 9 halachas here. Okay, and we'll do like this. Halacha Aleph. Today we'll do Mitzvah Shem Halacha Aleph and Beis. Halacha Aleph says, Elu Chatzizim B'Keilim. These are the things that make Chatzizos and Keilim. And they are Hazefes, V'Hamor. Zefes is tar, and Mor is what we think it is. There's in parentheses, it says some choices, Yesh Mefarsh HaChema, Yesh Mefarsh HaMistiki, Mistika, whatever those are. We translate usually as Mur. For our purposes, it's not so important. Mur, M-Y-R-R-H, is a sap, a gum that comes out of a tree. Okay, it's a certain kind of a tree. It's a sticky substance. Okay, so these two things, are Chatzizos the Kli Schuchas in glass Keilim. Beimi b'fnim, beimi b'chutz, whether it's on the inside or the outside. Let me read halacha beis, and then I'll explain to you what just happened over here. So these two things, these two types of gooey substances, are chatzizos on glass kelim. Halacha beis. Kol davar, this halacha beis will sound familiar to you. Kol davar shederach lahakbid olav chatzitz. Anything that you're makpid that it should not, that you don't want it to be on the kli is a chatzitza. V'yom lav, Aino chatzitz. But if you're not makpid, then it's not a chatzitza. El im kein hoyachayfe is ruboy, unless it was covering most of the kli. Okay, and we'll explain more of that in a second. So the Mechaber said it has to be Chatzitza, either you have to be Makpid or it has to be Roiv. And the Ramah sticks in Shachruris Hadabik B'Yarmi B'Chutz. If there's a dark, it's a soot, like a blackness that's stuck on the outside of your pot. Havik Yedayfen HaKli, that's considered like the part of the Kli. V'darka B'Kach, and it's normal to have that. I mean, everybody's got that on the outside of the Kli, these black spots. So it's not a chatzitza. It's an example of what the Mechaber had said, that if you're not makpid, then it's not a chatzitza, are these black spots on the outside of your clothes. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Right, I'm going to mention that in a second. I'm going to get to it. Let me get to the beginning halachas first, and I try to read it all to you first. Okay, so the first halacha, except for the little words in parentheses, the Elu Chatzim B'Keilim, what we see is a direct quote from a Mishnah in Mikvos. Okay, it's Parak Test Mishnah Hey. It's a direct quote from a Mishnah Mikvos. Okay, if you look at the Beis, if you bring to this a machlokes, what's pshat in this Mishnah? Okay, but there's Zefes and the Mor that are Chatzitz on the clay Schuchas. Okay, Rashi says that glass is so smooth and so easy to clean off that nothing's a chatzitz on it. Nothing that you put onto it is a problem. Everybody knows it just comes right off easily. It's no big deal. Except for these things are so sticky that on glass they're a chatzitza. On glass, nothing else would be a chatzitza. Except for these things that are really gooey and sticky. So they're hard to get off. That's what people don't want. But everything else nobody cares about at all. So in klei schuchis you have these special things. These are the only things that are chatzitza. That's how Rashi learns. And the other pshat is that zefes and mor are used as sealants. You coat a kli on the outside in order to, or maybe on the inside even, you coat a kli in order to keep it from leaking. And therefore, nobody does that on glass, which I understand to mean is because glass itself doesn't need to be sealed. It's solid, doesn't need to be sealed. It's not like a piece of wood. So therefore, nobody would put it onto it. So for glass, these are a chatzitza. But for other kelim, they wouldn't be a chatzitza because nobody cares. They want them onto it. You have to put them onto it because they're a sealing. You put them around a barrel or a jar because you want them to seal the thing in. But on glass, it doesn't need that, so nobody puts it in. So for glass, it's a chatzitza, but not for anything else. Okay, these are two pshatim. Okay, now Rashi, the tourist passes like Rashi. What? It's a direct quote out of the Mishnah. Okay, these are two pshatim in the Mishnah, and the tourist wrote like Rashi. And the Mechaber says nothing. The Mechaber doesn't tell you which way he holds. I'm telling you, it's word for word out of the Mishnah. Okay, so if you want to know why does the Mechaber not tell you which way to think, the Torah tells you that he passes like Rashi. So the reason is because you would say is the reason because very simple. Because who cares? Look at halacha beis. When you get to halacha beis, it tells you that there's a rule, and the rule is what's the rule? The rule is midoraisa. A chatzitza means something that's makpid and rubai. That's the rule for a chatzitza. It's only chatzitza if you're makpid on it and if it covers rubai. That's the rule. Midrabanan, if either one of those are there, either if it's makpid or it's rubai, midrabanan, that's a puzzle. It's no good. And midrabanan, if it's miyat she'ena makpid, then it's okay. That's the Mechaber says on halacha beis. So that's the rule. And once I know that rule, then I don't care about what the din is. Do I care whether Zephys is on glass or if it's not on glass? It doesn't make a difference. It depends if you're makpid or you're not makpid, whatever it is. There's a rule. We look at everything the way whether people makpid or not. For example, what would be nowadays? Okay, Rashi says that on glass, no one's makpid on anything except for Zephys. You think that's true? You think that nowadays that would be the rule? Of course that's not the rule. Of course the rule's not Zephys. Today, if I had glue on the side of my thing, if I had a sticker on the side of my glass, would I be makpid? Of course I'd be makpid. So the Mishnah that has not given it to us. Or the other way around. It said the other Rishonim learned that they used to seal Keilim with these things so nobody would be makpid if there was Zephys on the outside of their clay. Is that true? Of course it's not true. If I had a metal cup and I had Zephys on the outside of it, would I be makpid? Of course I'd be makpid. In other words, the Mishnah sort of, it doesn't make a difference. It's machlokes rishonim because once we know the rule, then we don't care about the example. In fact, the Torah doesn't bring the rule. Okay, so for the Torah, he's bringing the Mishnah, and then the Mishnah tells you what the pshat is, which Rishonim hold like. But the Mechaber is going to tell you halacha beis that there's a rule. Once I have a rule, then I don't really care. What's the difference in this machlokes rishonim? Machlokes rishonim has nothing to do with us today. The machlokes rishonim is a pshat in the Mishnah because it's very nice. There's a sefer halacha to tell us what we do. Halacha beis is what's going to tell us.
So something changed from the Torah's times. In Torah's times, it wasn't enough.
No, because the Torah is coming from a different perspective. He brought a Mishnah. I don't know. I'm not getting a great answer for the Torah, but he brings a Mishnah. He tells you what the okay. So now, but the truth is, if I'm telling you that's right, well, what's pshat in the Mishnah then? Okay, so I'm making you, in the times of the Mishnah, it was a good example. Okay, well, why would the Mishnah tell us, and why does the Mishnah give us an example of something and tell you, this is how Zephys and more are choitzis or they're not choitzis? What's the reason, okay, this is almost a rhetorical question, but what's the reason why a Mishnah would tell you an example? Why didn't the Mishnah just tell us that rule? I'm telling you, there's a smarter way to do this, which is say halacha beis, which is, if it's miyat makpid and miyat she'ena makpid, that's the rule of halacha beis. What's the point of the Mishnah telling us this example, which is only for its times? Okay, I guess you could tell me that they thought people would always do like that. No, but the answer is like this. The Mishnah that I just read to you is Mishnah Hay. Okay? The Mishnah that I just read to you, I told you, it's Parak Test Mishnah Hay. Okay? The whole Parak Test is full of Chatzizos. It's not talking about Tevillas Keilim the way we do Tevillas Keilim for things that you bought for a guy. Okay? Halacha Aleph through Dalet, Mishnah Aleph through Dalet, in that Parak is about what's a chatzitza in a person. Okay, what's a chatzitza when a person is toivel? What is or is not a chatzitza? And Mishnah Hey, Vav, and Zayin are what's chatzitzas in Keilim. Okay, not Keilim for Tevillas Keilim like we think of it. Keilim that became tummy, that you have to be toivel. What's a chatzitza in it? So, for example, okay, there's one of the Mishnahs here is about what's a chatzitza on a saddle. Okay, what is or is not a chatzitza on a saddle? So, no one does Tevillas Keilim on a saddle. Of course not. So, the only one example in that whole parak is the only one example that has to do with Tevillas Keilim for our type of Tevillas Keilim, what we do when we buy something from a guy, is this one case. But the parak is full of examples, and the pshat is like this. The reason why the Mishnayos give us so many examples, and don't just say the rule, is because the rule that says miyat hamakpid, miyat she'ena makpid, that's a nice rule. But when you hear all the examples and the subtleties, this one is choitzis on the inside, this one is choitzis on the outside, and you try to understand each one of those cases, you're going to get a better havana in the rule. The rule is very nice. The rule is miyat hamakpid, miyat she'ena makpid. But when you go through all the hechatimtzas that the Mishnah says, and this Mishnah even has machlokes in about what is a chatzitza or is not, when you go to understand what's pshat in all those cases, once you get that havana to all those cases, between them you get a much better picture of what the rule of miyat hamakpid and miyat she'ena makpid is. So that's why the Mishnah says all the cases. Of course, for them it was practical also. But the point is not really the practical. The point is, once you understand that 7 Mishnayos worth of cases, all about all different kinds of things, now you have a better way to apply that rule when you're going to have a shayla. Okay. So for us, there's only one of the cases that had anything to do with our kind of Tevillas Keilim, so the Mechaber says it. He says, okay, this is the case that it says in the Mishnah. But we're not going to get so much out of saying one case. For us already, for one case, we might as well already just have the rule, which is halacha base. But in the Mishnayos, why does the Mishnayos say? Because the Mishnayos has got a dozen cases, 20 cases. I don't know how many cases in all those 7 Mishnayos. It's worth it to say. So, all I want to tell you is that there are, the Achronim, I see in the Achronim 2 things that they pulled out of a case. This case of, this din of Zephis and Mar, okay? That to us, the actual case means nothing to us, okay? If Zephis was on regular kli, it would be choitzes, and if other things were on glis, they would also be choitzes. The actual din would not make a difference. But first, like this. The Aruch Shulchan is kasha. He says, a variation of what I asked you before. He says, if the rule is that it depends on Makpid and Aino Makpid, like Ruba and Miyud, and Makpid and Aino Makpid, he says, why does the Mishnah give you rules at all? He said, what examples at all? Why doesn't the Mishnah tell you that? Because, he is in a different way. He says is, Makpid and Aino Makpid depends on what you're Makpid or you're not Makpid. So, how could there even be a rule about whether something is Makpid or Aino Makpid? Ask the guy, do you care or do you not care? How could we make a rule about something? Not a shadow of timing. It's a shadow just of, what's the rule? Either I'm Makpid, either I care or I don't care. Some people are more particular, some people less particular. He says, you see from there, the fact that the Mishnah can even tell you that there's such a thing as Makpid and Aino Makpid tells us that if most people are Makpid on something, and you happen to be a person who's not Makpid, doesn't make a difference. That is such a musad that there are things that the din is that you're a Makpid on it. Meaning, it doesn't depend on you. Don't think about just yourself, am I Makpid or am I Makpid? If most people, the normal people are Makpid on this thing, that's considered Makpid. Even if you happen to be a slob and you don't care about it, doesn't make a difference. Okay? What's Makpid depends on what most people do. That. At the same time, that's a chumrah. Okay? The chumrah goes the other way also, he says, which is that if most people are not Makpid, and you happen to be a person who's Makpid, then view it as a chatzitza. Okay? The Mishnah is only telling you the chumrah, that if most people consider are Makpid on this thing, it's a chatzitza and you're not allowed to be tied with it. But if the other way around, if most people consider not to be a chatzitza and you are, then it is considered a Makpid. Okay? We said, let me just finish one. So we said the same thing came up, it was a Prichadash, when we learned Sim Pedalit in Hilchos Tevillas. He said it about Baal Tashatzu. Okay? That Baal Tashatzu also, if most people, he brought rice from Gemaras, if most people would be disgusted by eating a certain thing, then it is Baal Tashatzu, even if you don't care. And the other way around, if you care, but most people don't, then it's also Baal Tashatzu. Okay, he brought rice from Gemaras, the same idea, which is, you follow most people in it, there was Tashatzu, over here it's Makpid, L'chumra, but also for yourself L'chumra. Yes?
I think that's the first in the possible in Kustadik Chess, by the Nida works the same way.
That what?
But also, she has a chatzitza that most people are Makpid even if she's not.
Okay, it could be. We skipped all those pages. We went all the way from Kuf up to Reish Beis. I don't know what it said in the middle. Okay. Another thing is, there's a sefer called Sefer Tevillas Keilim. Tzikon wrote many svarim. One of them, most of them, the ones I've seen are very thorough, very done well. This Sefer Tevillas Keilim, he says like this. He says, our din, halacha aleph just brought the Mishnah. But the Beis Yosef brings that there's also Tosefta about it. The Rambam brings Tosefta halacha also. And that is, the Mishnah says, in glass, these things are choitzes, beim b'mifrim, beim b'chutz. Okay? But the Tosefta says, that's only true for a regular homeowner, a regular person who has a kli zchuches. He says, but if you're a person who makes glass, it's only a chatzitza on the inside and not on the outside. So the Mishnah said, beim b'mifrim, beim b'chutz, on the inside or on the outside. Inside means the part that touches the food, and outside means the part that doesn't touch the food. But if you're a glassmaker, then it's only on the inside and not on the outside. Yeah, I don't know why. I don't understand why the glassmaker is different. But you see from there is a point that's sort of the opposite of what the Aruch Shulchan said, which is that when we say that most people are Makpid and most people are not Makpid, there are classes of people. So when you have a person most regular people are Makpid on this Zephis on the inside or on the outside. But if you're a glassmaker, you're like in a different class of people. You're the guys who manufacture the glass. You're only Makpid on the inside and on the outside. So for you, it's considered Aino Makpid. But you're an Aino Makpid. And even though the fact is tomorrow, what are you going to do with this piece of glass? You're going to sell it to a regular consumer who's going to be Makpid. But it's considered, if you're in the class of people who are glass makers, okay, however the group that is, then we follow your rules, even though for the average person, and even the person who's actually going to end up with this glass in a day from now, that person would be Makpid. If you're not Makpid, you're not considered Makpid. Okay? So we care about you, we don't care about individuals, that's him, but if you are part of a different group, then that's enough. So the Sefer Tevillas Keilim comes up with, listen to this nafkamina. He says, the nafkamina is like this. He says, we talked about it a long time ago, whether a storekeeper is allowed to tovel dishes for people before they buy. Okay, I have 20 pots in my store. I want to tovel them all. Now I tell them already get toveled. You don't have to tovel them, but I'm offering you a service. So he says like this. He says, let's assume that you'd be allowed to. Okay, we talked about that then whether you are or you're not allowed to. Let's say you assume that the person is allowed to tovel them before him. See, he says, if you're a storekeeper, you want to have price tags on your products because you want people to know how much it costs. You put the price tag onto there. So your storekeepers are Aino Makpid to have price tags on their products. Consumers are all Makpid to have price tags. Nobody wants a price tag on the product. So if you're a storekeeper and you have a price tag on the thing, for you it's an Aino Makpid, even though you know that tomorrow it's going to be sold to someone and that person is going to be Makpid on the thing, but he says it's exactly like by the Zephes, by the store. It's a glass maker over there also. Right now I'm in a class of people who are Aino Makpid, storekeepers. It's true. Storekeepers are like the glass makers. They're not Makpid to have this kind of chatzitza. So you'd be allowed to table even with the sticker on it. And then, with the sticker, not a sticker, with a price tag. You want the price tag to be on there. And then, but if the person himself were to buy it, that person wouldn't be allowed to, because for him it would be considered Makpid. What?
You have to know when the glass maker is in a Makpid.
We have to know why he's Aino Makpid? Why do we have to know why?
Because that's his Makpid. He doesn't mind glass with things outside. He don't drink from it.
Okay.
You have no to this price tag.
No, glass makers don't drink from it. They make glass to sell it.
You have to know what...
He's Aino Makpid. Wait, he's Aino Makpid. Why do I care why he's Aino Makpid? Why do I care why he's Aino Makpid? The storekeeper is also Aino Makpid. I know the storekeeper's Aino Makpid. He put the sticker on purpose.
He's Makpid to forget it. He wants it there. He wants a sticker. He doesn't want the click to look the way it's supposed to look. He wants the click to have this price because he wants it for a reason.
Right.
Or maybe tomorrow change the price, he wants to change it to put a different price. Whatever it is, you can't.
I don't know.
Without knowing why
really? Okay, I didn't think like that. I thought it's
it's not a person doesn't mind it for personal use. He doesn't mind.
No, but it's not. What do you mean for personal use? He's a glass maker. When he starts drinking out of it,
He's a glass maker.
When he drinks out of it, he's not a glass maker. Now he's just a private consumer.
He uses it as needed, and people come in, they buy it.
Right. Like paint that I'm not on the paint. The Mishnah as a case of the
yeah.
Let's
say that would be true. That makes it worse. Because he's still he's a class of people who are not Makpid. Because this guy, if I was the store owner and I would want to drink out of my cup, then I wouldn't want the label on it. No, okay, maybe.
Same thing with the label as well, right?
That what?
The price tag.
That what?
Pots come with labels. Does he have to peel them off or not?
You
Forget price tags, I'm saying.
A regular label. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But yeah, as a rule you would say, because I'm not Makpid. I don't want
the storekeeper.
The storekeeper needs to see what brand it is for this night. Okay, so that yes, but yeah, let's say the price tag I thought was simpler. That the dafka wants the price of the dafka. Okay, Now the Ramah said that this black that's on the outside of a pot, it's like the doifin akli. So the Aruch Shulchan says it's based on a Mishnah. It's really based on a Mishnah. That it's talking about that this black is on the outside of the pot. But what happens because people, it's just part of what goes on, and people are not Makpid, but what happens if there be this kind of black stuff on the inside of the pot? Then it would be Makpid. What the case there in the Mishnah is, someone had a barbecue and they needed to put the coals out, so they dunked the coals into their pot. Okay, they stuck it into their pot that was filled with water, so it would leave residue on the inside of the pot. So then the person, of course, would be Makpid. Nobody wants that stuff on the inside. They just need to put the fire out, so they dunked it into the pot. So then the person, then he says, would be Makpid. So Rav Wasserman says, that was all nice and true in those days. He says, because in those days, everybody, you cooked with an open fire, with like coals, so everybody's pots had black on the outside of it. That was a normal thing. and nobody would get black on the inside of their pot, so you'd be makpid on the inside, but you wouldn't be makpid on the outside. He says, but nowadays, he says, nobody cooks with coal. People don't cook in their houses with coals. No one has black on the outside of their pot. They would be makpid. He says, and on a kettle, gets limestone, stuck on the inside of it, gets buildup of stuff on the inside. There, it's so normal, people are not makpid on it. Okay, so for us, there are things on the inside that we're not makpid on, and on the outside that we are makpid on. Okay, so but of course the rule is the same. The rule is what's normal. What the Ramah said is v'darka v'kach. That's the normal way you have it. People are not makpid, so then it's not a chatzitza. But we're to be so in the days of the Ramah, or in the days of the Mishnayos, the outside people were not makpid, the inside people were, and by us it's punk fakir. The rule is the same. Just that the hechtimtzas changed. Okay. Now, another example of this Ramah is I have a picture for you. That's what I'm waiting for. It's just one picture. I didn't put it up.
Keeping us in suspense.
No, just so you would. Yeah, it's like this. This actually came in a consumer access disc. Okay, I have one to mention. I'm going to tell you this. Okay, and that is like this. There was a person who was being Megayer. Okay, so a person was being Megayer. We talked about whether he has to table his kettle. Okay, he was going to be tabling his kettle. So the thing is, ger is unusual in the sense that most of us table our dishes when they're brand new. And most of us don't table dishes that are used. Why would we ever table used dishes? You couldn't use it the first time. Okay, it's very unusual that we should table. We could buy used dishes, I guess, and then you have to table them. What? We forgot, but it's not so typical. But for a ger, all of a sudden it's very typical because he's been Magayer on today. For the past month, he's been keeping kosher. He has kosher dishes, but he can't table them. So he's practicing. He knows. So I think we talked about that. He knows that he kept them kosher. So we talked about that. Okay, it's a question whether he has to Kashrus dishes. It's a question. Okay, let's just assume he doesn't have. Well, he's not. If he's dealing with kashrus, he's about to get more complicated because then he may have to get rid of chatzizos for the kashrus Shabbat. Okay, but we're now talking about the Tevillas Shabbat. Okay, so the ger has a situation where all of a sudden he has to table things that he's tabling things that are dirty. So the ger sends us two pictures. Okay, one is on the right side. Now they're not to size, but the one on the right side is a sheet pan. Okay, and that looks exactly like the sheet pan in my house. Okay, which is it's fully black splotches from things being burnt on. And the left is, if I remember, I think it's upside down from a toaster oven. Okay, and that also has stuff burnt onto it. Okay, so he says that I want to table these things. Okay. So he says I want to table stuff. I want to table these things. I want to know if I can table them. I can't get things off. Okay. What do you say? No, it's not going to get clean. It's not going to get clean.
It's burnt off.
For what? We're not talking about. No, but for tefillah, if it's a chatzitza, if it's there, the thing is there. Okay, so the answer is it's going to depend on like this. So at this point, it's an example of what the Ramah said that darka v'kach, and people are not makpid on that thing. So then it's going to depend on whether it's locher, whether it's rubai or miutai. Okay, that's what it's going to depend on. So there's two things that this takes us to. The first is, my understanding is, something is only a chatzitza if that thing blocks the water from getting onto the kli. Okay? But if it's just a discoloration of the kli, then it's not going to make a difference. It's not blocking the kli. It's just the inside of the kli is dyed a different color, so to speak. That's not a chatzitza. Okay? So when we think about is there a chatzitza, when we think about is it roiv or is it not roiv, then we have to think about which one of these spots. I guess you'd have to look at it and say which of these spots are just discolorations. The metal got discolored from being burnt on. Excuse me. Which one of them are actually coverings on? There's a piece. There's something stuck onto the piece. The second is the Mechaber says back in Kufrav when he talked about chatzitza. We said we were going to talk about it here. So the Makpid says something interesting. He says like this. Okay, in Aruch Gimel he says, you have to take, he's talking about rust there. He says, if a person, v'im shif, v'nasan gecholim, v'nishar adayim ma'atsha chaluda, shal yuchel laver, if you scrubbed it, and you burnt it away, and there's still some rust that you can't get off, having mircha in the makpid or the inner chatzitz. So then it's a mircha in the makpid and it's not a chatzitz. Okay, so the implication from the Mechaber is that if I have something that's a mircha in the makpid, I shouldn't be toveling anyhow. if I did Tevel it, the tefillah would work. I shouldn't be using it for tefillah until I make every effort to get the Mich Aino Makpid off. And then, at that point, when I did as much as I could, and at this point I can't get any more off, then I can Tevel. He says, if I shift it, and I burnt it off, and I still got a piece I can't get off, then it's Mich Aino Makpid, you could do it. Mitzvah says, don't just say it's Mich Aino Makpid, the tefillah works. No, Mich Aino Makpid, the tefillah works if you're stuck, or if you did it already. But not that a person should do nothing. So when we say that a person's Mich Aino Makpid, is the tefillah works, the person has to make an effort to get it clean. So I don't know if he has to self-clean it, but he has to, because you're Makpid on that, but you could get over, you're Makpid on it. Not because. Let's look at this pen. Okay. Right now, the guy's using this pen every day of the week. He's using this pen every day of the week. Okay. He's using the pen every day of the week. Is he Makpid? No, he's not Makpid. He doesn't care. He's using it like this every day. So why would the Mechaber say, just like the Mechaber's case, he has rust on it. He uses it every day like that. So why would the Mechaber say, go scrub it first and burn it off? What do you mean? I'm not Makpid. It's not that by scrubbing proves what I'm not a Makpid, I'm not Makpid. I know that I'm not Makpid. I've used it every day until now like that. So the point is to say that even Mich Aino Makpid, it works, and if b'diavad, so to speak, b'diavad it works, or if you're stuck, it works. But if the person could get off, he should be getting to the point that there should be, so to speak, no chatzitza. Okay, if that's in Hilchos Nida, we don't say the Mechaber says like that.
The Mechaber in Hilchos Nida doesn't say that.
But Lechatchila, we don't know women to go. Right, Lechatchila, we don't know.
We find it in the Mechaber like that. The wise ones that might need the.
Okay. So it's actually interesting. It's actually interesting. I don't know that. I know is when I answered him first to that, he said to me, he says, it's true that by Tevillas Keilim we get off of Mich Aino Makpid, not as carefully as we do by the Chatzizos. Okay. Maybe because of the seriousness of the Isser, he says over there would be more particular to get off of Mich Aino Makpid. In both cases, you should try, but in the end, if not, then it's fine. But for Keilim, you do what you could, and if you did what you could,
What's the shot?
Why
have to get it off?
Because
it works.
I get that understanding that even though the Midaraisa you need Rubai Umakvid. Midrabanan you need even one of them. When we say Midrabanan, you can have neither is okay. If you have Mich Aino Makpid, then that's good enough. Even that's a bit I don't know where it says that. I'm just saying the Mechaber says it.
What's as far as
I guess as far as you're not supposed to have Chatzizos. I guess Chazal is not telling you don't follow the Daraisa of Makpid. Midrabanan you have to have no Chatzizos. Okay, one last thing is,
but is this thing is that concept? Let's say people are Makpid on. But I can't get it off. I don't like this thing. I want to get it off. I can't get it off. So that's it. I'm not throwing the Keilim out. I'm keeping it.
That's Aino Makpid. That's the Rama called it.
I don't like this thing. You tell me how to get it off, I'll get it off. I'll try to get it off.
Rama says Takabakach. It's just like Takabakach.
This is not Takabakach. I got some stupid thing on my Keilim and I can't get it off. That's what
I would think that it's considered in Makpid.
But I resigned myself.
Resign means in Makpid. Okay, so one last thing. One last thing is that Achronim say that this is what I thought you were going to say beforehand, that there are some times where people who have labels on their dishes that they want because it shows off how chashuv their dishes are. Okay? No, I don't mean mechutz, but I guess it's mechutz also. But yeah, it's a fancy thing. So then it shows how chashuv I am by putting on the label. Okay, so for those things, that's considered Aino Makpid. Okay, and I'm just going to tell you, but I'm not going to tell you today, which is, we're going to talk about it.
Why don't I have to take it off?
Because I'm Aino Makpid.
No,
it's in Lechatchila.
Yeah, it's not Aino Makpid. You're Makpid.
Okay, that's a good question. I'm not sure. Okay, we're going to talk about in a future time whether this thing of Chatzizos, whether the Chatzizos applies to basis starim. Okay, it's going to come up in interesting ways in the coming dinim. What?
Curing.
We're going to talk about that, and that is going to lead us to understanding, at least I think, to a deeper understanding of what's wrong with having chatzitz in the first place. Okay, we said the din is you're not having chatzitz, but maybe a better understanding of what's wrong with having. Why shouldn't we have a chatzitz?